This was back in 1983 in Tavshim Mem Gimel. It was on a Yud Aleph Nisan, on the day of the Rebbe's birthday. Generally, the day of the Rebbe's birthday is a very uplifting day. The Chassidim are in a very uplifted mood. The Rebbe is in a very uplifted mood. And by the way, not every year there was a Farbrengen on Yud Aleph Nisan. Until 1971, the Rebbe did not Farbrengen on Yud Aleph Nisan. Only when the Rebbe turned 50, 60, a round number, the Rebbe said a maimer. But to Farbrengen, the Rebbe started only in 1971, 72. The real big one was when the Rebbe turned 70 years old, in 1972, Tavshil Lamed Beis, and then the Rebbe started Farbrengen every year, Baruch Hashem. In 1983, in the second Sikha, the Rebbe said a beautiful story. We need a separate shir for that story. That story is called the story of the yacht. Ask anybody, the story of the yacht that the Rebbe said. Everybody will know what we're talking about. I'm just going to say the point of it as an introduction to the Sikha that we're going to be learning. The Rebbe said then that there's this Jew, a very tired Yid, and the Rebbe hardly ever said any names by Farbrengens, but later it turned out that this was a real tired chassid of the Rebbe, Mr. David Chase from Hartford, Connecticut. He helps a lot the yeshiva in Morristown and many other institutions of Lubavitch, and of course in Hartford itself. And this Yid had a yacht, a boat, a yacht that you go with in when you're on vacation and you travel with it. And Rabbi David was on the yacht. And one time he went over to the captain that drives the yacht, and he asked him, tell me, maybe you could tell me where is east? So the captain said, sure, no problem. And he showed him where is east. Goes by a few hours, and again, Rabbi David asked him, maybe you know where is east? And yeah, he told him where is east. In the beginning, the captain thought that this was just a, as we say in Hebrew, a mikra nikra. It happened, for whatever reason he wanted to know where is east. But after it happened a whole bunch of times, the captain started becoming a little suspicious. And he told Mr. Chase, are you suspecting that maybe I'm not going in the right direction? Why do you keep on asking me where is east? And Rabbi David relaxed him and assured him, no. Now, by the way, the Rebbe said that this person is a person who is proud of his Yiddishkeit and is becoming more and more observant to the Torah mitzvahs, like a Jew should be, always constantly growing. And he told him, no, I'm not suspecting of you, chas v'shalom. The reason why I'm asking you where is east is because I daven to the Eibishter, to God, 3 times a day. When you daven to the Eibishter, there has to be a preparation. The preparation is da lifnei mi ato omed. You have to know who you are standing in front of. You have to prepare yourself. You don't just start davening. You daven to the Eibishter. So therefore, we daven in a certain direction. Where do we daven to? We daven to east, because that's where the Beis Hamikdash is, Yerushalayim, etc. This is what Reb David explained to the captain. The captain heard this. He thought to himself, wow, this Reb David, Bli Ayin Hare, Baruch Hashem, has parnasa. He has everything he needs, seemingly, everything. And not only that, he has people working for him, and he's one of them, this captain. And he still finds it important to daven 3 times a day to the Eibishter. How much more so? Everybody else, simple people, of course, they should see that there is a creator above. And therefore, if he started thinking to himself that if he's doing something, before he does it, hey, wait a minute, is this correct? Does the Eibishter agree? Or is this maybe something which is not so givaldik? Because he understood from Reb David that the Eibishter is somebody who is ayin roya ve'oizen shamas. The Eibishter is an eye that sees constantly, and he hears everything that's going on, even though we may not see him, but he sees us. And this made him do things correctly. This is what the Rebbe spoke, Yud Aleph Nisan story, and the Rebbe went on explaining what we learned from this, how we have to also spread the concept of the Eibishter not only to Yidden, lahavdil but also to Goyim, and the Rebbe spoke very, very at length, and as I said, we need a separate shir for that. A week and a half later came Achron Shel Pesach. And again, the Rebbe has a Fabrengen every time on Achron Shel Pesach. And the Rebbe said, on Yud Aleph Nissen, I said a story about the yacht. And I was curious to know what was the Hemshech, what was the continuation of it. The Rebbe said, and I investigated, and it turned out that this captain, this sailor, from that meeting with Mr. Chase about the importance of davening to the Eibishter, wherever he goes, when he meets his family or he meets friends, he tells them, people, there's an Eibishter. You have to realize that there's an Eibishter. And if all the people in the world would realize that there's an Eibishter, this world wouldn't look like the jungle that it is. This would be a perfect place. And again, the Rebbe continued on the whole subject of Sheva Mitzvahs, how important it is even to influence even just one person. Because one person then has a ripple effect. Because a mitzvah has a tendency of mitzvah gereres mitzvah. One mitzvah schleps another mitzvah. And therefore, by one person doing the right thing, then we're going to get a second person until we get the whole world to become a perfect place. And the Rebbe explained that this is also, of course, when it comes to influencing Yidden, that every single Yid is a whole world for itself. And this is an answer to those who complain always, what's the big deal if we find another person and we do a mitzvah with him, it's only one person. And the Rebbe continued on and on about that. The concept of spreading Yiddishkeit, before the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, it almost didn't exist. This is something which is that the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe and Chassidus Chabad is the one that explained it al pi Torah. And finally, we went through that hurdle. We're past it. The whole world understands that there's a concept of going out there and spreading Yiddishkeit, and there are plenty who already are copying it from all ends, etc., which is something that we don't need to elaborate on. Now the question is, the Rebbe started a concept of also going out to the Goyim, to go to the Gentiles and spread amongst them the concept that there is an Eibishter, that there is a God, and He is the only God, and we have to follow Him, etc., etc. Everybody asked the question. From a humanitarian angle, okay, we're trying to get the world to become a better place. And of course, when people believe that there is a supernatural, superhuman, superpower, they obviously will follow it, sort of. The question is, where is the source in Torah? Where is the source in Torah that a Yid has to go out and publicize and influence even the non-Jewish people? The concept of the Eibishter, the unity of the Eibishter, the Sheva Mitzvahs, etc. Now, this is a massive concept, and today we are just going to touch the surface of this subject, because the Rebbe has a lot of sichos on it, and we are just going to do one little point of where do we see in the Torah this idea of what the Goyim can accomplish, contrary to public opinion, that Gentiles have nothing to do with the Eibishter, and to show how not only they can, but they have to, and it is a mitzvah upon every single Yid to see to it that even his Gentile friends and acquaintances should believe in the oneness or the unity of the Eibishter, and of course follow the Sheva Mitzvahs. So this is in Parshas Yisro. This is in Likutei Sichos, volume 21, pages 100 through 107. So go to your curriculum, and let's start from the sources. To go to source number 1, this is a pasuk in Parshas Yisro. The parsha over here discusses how the Yidden came to Har Sinai, to the mountain of Har Sinai after they left Egypt, and now they are ready to accept the Torah. So there was a whole preparation here. So go to source number 1, Parshas Yisro, Perik Yutes, pasuk Aleph. The Torah says as follows: B'chodesh hashlishi letzeis b'nei Yisrael me'eret Mitzrayim. On the 3rd month from when the Yidden left Egypt, B'yom hazeh ba'u midbar Sinai. On this day they came amid Midbar Sinai. And as all the Mefarshim explain, the commentaries explain, the 1st month was Nisan, the 2nd month is Iyar, the 3rd month is Sivan. This was Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the 1st day of the month of Sivan. They came to Har Sinai. Next pasuk, pasuk Beis, source number 2. Vayisu me'Refidim, they traveled from Refidim. Vayovoyu midbar Sinai, and they came to the desert of Sinai. Vayachanu bamidbar, and they camped in the desert. Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahar, and the Yidden camped in front of the mountain. Now, there's something very interesting here in this pasuk. When we look at the pasuk carefully in the words, the first word is Vayisu me'Refidim, and they traveled from Refidim. Vayavoyu midbar Sinai, and they came to midbar Sinai. Vayachanu bamidbar, and they camped in the desert. But then the pasuk says, Vayichan sham Yisrael neged ahar, and he camped. Who's he? The nation of Israel camped in front of the mountain. All the other times in the pasuk it says is in plural, and they traveled, and they came, and they camped. The last time when it says the concept, and he camped, it says Vayichan in the singular form. So of course we go to our chief commentator, and that is Rashi. It says Rashi as follows, go to source number 3. Vayichan sham Yisrael, and Yisrael camped there in the singular. Says Rashi, why is it written in the singular? Ke ish echad belev echad. They were like one man with one heart. Aval sha'ar kol hachaniyos, but all the other times that the Yidden made their rest stops, where they stopped, betar umes ubemachlekus. It was always with complaints and strife, etc., and friction, whatever it is. Without getting into all the details here, seemingly, what is Rashi's problem here? Why does the Torah switch from the plural to the singular? In the beginning of the pasuk, the Torah talks plural. In the end of the pasuk, the Torah says singular. Why? Answers Rashi. Why is it singular? To say that over here the Yidden were ish echad belev echad, one person, one heart. How do we see that this is what the Mefarshim say? Look at source number 4. In source number 4, which is the Devek Tov. The Devek Tov is one of the chief commentators on Rashi. Reb Shimshon Roshenberg, he was from about 400 years ago at least. He says like this, look at source number 4, Vayichan Yisrael, says the Devek Tov, Kashele, Rashi's question is, Vayachanu mi boile lemeimer. Instead of saying Vayichan singular, it should have said Vayachanu, it should have said plural. And that's Rashi's question. And therefore Rashi answers, Ki shechad belev echad. And the same thing, if you go to source number 5, the commentator which is called Dikduke Rashi, his name was Rabbi Yitzchok, whatever. So he also says, Vayichan sham Yisrael, and Yisrael camped there. Rashi says, Ki ish echad belev echad. Explains that the Dikduke Rashi, De'im lekein, because if not so, Vayachanu mi boile belashon rabim. He should have said it in a plural. Elavadai, but for sure, what does it come to say? Lehoyre is to tell you, Shehayu kulam ke ish echad belev echad. They're coming to tell you that the Yidden were like one man with one heart. This is what all the Mefarshim say. Of course, the Rebbe comes and says, impossible. It's impossible that this is what Rashi is telling us. The fact that we have a pasuk that talks about the same thing, first in a plural and then in a singular, or the other way around, it's no big deal. We find that plenty of times in the Torah. And therefore, you cannot tell me that all of a sudden over here Rashi has a problem with that. Because if Rashi would have had a problem, he would have had to do it in all the other places in the Torah. And the Rebbe will show us how we have a few places in the Torah where we see singular and plural in the same pasuk, and Rashi doesn't say a word. Why? Because it's normal for the pasuk to switch singular to plural. That means that over here something happened that forces Rashi to say, ooh, you know why here it's singular? Because ki ish echad belev echad. Let's see, Taka, what it is. And look at source number 6. Source number 6, which is also in this same parsha, but towards the end. After the Rebbe gave the Torah, and he gave the 10 Commandments, says the Torah, look in source number 6, it's in Yisro, Peirik, Chav, Pasuk Tesvav. V'chol ha'am royim es hakolos es halapidim, and all the people saw the voices and the torches, v'eskol ha'shofar, and the voice of the shofar, v'sahar oshen, and the whole mountain was fuming from Matan Torah. Vayar ha'am, and the people saw, vayar, singular, vayonu, and they trembled, vayamdu merachik, and they stood from far. We see here in the pasuk that we have singular and plural, few words next to each other. Vayar ha'am, he saw, the people saw. It doesn't say vayir'u ha'am, they saw. It says vayar, he saw, singular. Vayonu, and they trembled. So it's very clear that a pasuk can have singular and plural, and Rashi doesn't have a problem with it. Here's another proof. Go to source number 7. In Parshas Beshalach, the Parsha before Yisro, after the Yidden left Mitzrayim, and after the Egyptians ran after the Jews, and they all were sunk they all drowned in the Yam Suf. What does the pasuk say in Perik Yudalet pasuk Lamed Aleph in Parsha Beshalach? Vayar Yisrael es hayot agdoila, and Yisrael saw the great hand, the mighty hand, Asher also Hashem b'Mitzrayim, that the Rebbe did to the Egyptians. Vayir'u ha'am es Hashem, and the people, they feared Hashem. Vayaminu b'Hashem uv'Moshe Abdi, and they believed in Hashem and in Moshe's servant. We see again in the same pasuk, the first word in the pasuk is Vayar Yisrael, and he saw, in singular. The end of the pasuk is Vayir'u, and they feared. Why? It's no question, because the pasuk will switch around from singular to plural when we're talking about a lot of people. So the question is, how come by us, when it comes to Vayichan Sham Yisrael, all of a sudden Rashi has this question? Azoi, here it says plural, singular. Why? No, says the Rebbe, no, that's not Rashi's question. Rashi does not have a problem. Why singular and plural, as we see in the other psukim? Rashi here is coming to tell us a total different story. And the question is, what is it? Now we're going to ask a bigger question. What does Rashi say? That when we talk about a nation, that they are united together, we say, Ki'ish echad, belev echad. Like one man with one heart. Now listen to this one. Go to source number 8. This is last week's part, the week before Yisro in Parsha Beshalach, Perik Yedalet, Pasuk Tes, and then Pasuk Yud. It says that Paro saw that the Yidden left, and he decided, what kind of business is this? And he decided he's going to run after the Jews, and he's going to kill them. Says the Pasuk, look at source number 8. Vayirdefu Mitzrayim achareim, and the Egyptians ran after the Jews. You see, Vayirdefu, and they ran after the Jews. Vayasigu oisam chaynim alayam, and they reached them as the Yidden were camped by the sea. Kol susrech of Paroi, all the horses of Paroi, the chariots of Paroi, Farosha v'chelo, the whole army. And then the pasuk says, Uparoi hikriv. Paroi started getting close to the Jews. Vayis'u v'nei Yisrael leseneihem, and the Yidden raised their eyes. They raised their eyes. V'hinei Mitzrayim, and all of a sudden they saw that the Egyptians, noiseya achareihem. The Egyptians are, not all the Egyptians, he is running after them. Noiseya, not noisim. Vayir'u me'oid, and the Yidden all feared. They got scared. Vayitzaku v'nei Yisrael el Hashem, and the Yidden screamed out to the Eibishter. So the whole pasuk, when it talks about the Egyptians and talks about the Jews, it talks all in plural. Vayirdefu Mitzrayim, and they ran after the Jews. Vayasigu, and they reached the Jews. All of a sudden, in the middle, there's one time that it's singular. Which one? Vehine Mitzrayim noiseya achareihem. The Egypt is running after the Jews. And all of a sudden, Rashi here has the same question. Why over here in the noiseya, the running, the traveling after the Jews, is written in singular? What does Rashi say? Look at source number 9. Noiseya achareim. He is running after them. Says Rashi, belev echad keish echad. With one heart and one, like one person. Was sagst du zu dem? What do you say to this? By the Yidden, Rashi says, keish echad, belev echad. One man with one heart. By the Egyptians, what does he say? One heart, one man. What's the difference? Why by the Yidden first comes the ish echad, or one person, and then one heart, and by the Egyptians it's exactly the opposite. And why over here does Rashi have a problem that it's a singular, and not like in source 6 and 7, where we have many times singular and plural? So obviously there's a total different story here which is going on. We'll ask 2 more questions. Seemingly, the source for Rashi is in the Mechilta. Mechilta is the equivalent to the Gemara, to the Medrash. It was also written by the same people. The Mechilta on this pasuk, where it says first, Vayachanu b'midbar, and then Vayichan Sham Yisrael, says the Mechilta as follows. Go to source number 10. Mechilta says, Kol makom shehu oimer vayis'u vayachanu, every place where it says in the Torah that they traveled and they camped, Nois'im b'machloikes v'choinim b'machloikes. They are traveling and camping in machloikes, in friction. Aval kan, over here, when they came to Har Sinai, hushvu kulam leiv echad. They all conformed, equaled with one heart. Lekach nemar, that's why it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged hahar. That in front of the mountain, it was Vayichan, it was singular. Because they came now to Matan Torah, so this is what made them as one. Seemingly, Rashi, when he says K'ish echad b'leiv echad, his source is the Mechilta here. Says the Rebbe, no, can't be. There's a lot of words that are similar. But the Mechilta has one message, and Rashi has a different message. And we'll show you two differences between the Mechilta and Rashi. The Mechilta says, Avol kan hushvu kulam leiv echad. Over here, they all became one. Rashi doesn't say kan. Rashi just says, it says Vayichan, that he camped in singular, Keish echad b'leiv echad. Totally not connected to the concept that because they came here, number one. And number two, the Mechilta ends, Lekach nemar, that's what it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged hahar, that the Yidden camped in front of the mountain. In other words, the mountain, Har Sinai, is what did it. When you go back to Rashi, go to source number 3, Rashi brings from the Pasuk only 3 words, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, but it doesn't bring the words neged hahar, which means that Rashi holds that Vayichan Sham Yisrael is one thing, and neged hahar, the concept that they were in front of the mountain, is a different story. So therefore, we need to understand why Take. What did it over here, this unity? According to the Mechilta, it's very simple. They came to Matan Torah, and this is what made the whole difference. But according to Rashi, it seems that that's not what it is. So we have to understand what is going on here. And we will understand it with one last question. And the question is, here it says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, right? The question is, why does it say in singular? Which words does Rashi bring from the Pasuk? Which word does Rashi have a problem with? The word Vayichan instead of Vayachanu. When you go back to our source, number 3, we see which are the words that Rashi brings from the Pasuk. Vayichan Sham Yisrael. Why does Rashi bring Sham Yisrael? Rashi should just bring the word Vayichan. That the difference is that here it says Vayichan and over it says Vayachanu. Why does he also bring the word Sham Yisrael? By the Egyptians, what does Rashi bring? Noiseya achareihem, right? Go back to source number 9. What does he bring? Noiseya achareihem. Why does he bring the word achareihem? He only has to bring the word noiseya, because that's the question that we have on the word he is traveling. If that's the case, he brought Yisrael by the Yidden, he should have brought also over here, Mitzrayim noiseya achareihem. And Rashi says no, only noiseya achareihem. Why doesn't he bring the concept of Mitzrayim? So obviously there's a total different story going on over here, and we need to understand what it is. To make a long story very short, briefly, it's like this. So far so good, yeah? The questions are clear. Basically the difference between Yidden and the Mitzrayim. By the Yidden it says K'ish echad b'leiv echad, and by the Mitzrayim it says b'leiv echad K'ish echad, which is a massive difference. And the question is, why does Rashi change it? That's the basic question. And why does the pasuk go here from singular to plural? And the answer is as follows. When we want to describe something that many people do, we have a choice whether to describe it in plural or in singular. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say it's election time in the country. Everybody's going to elect a president. So I can say it in 2 ways. I could either say, the people went to vote. When I say the people went to vote, it's in the plural sense. They went to vote. I could also say, the nation voted. The nation went to vote. If I say the people went to vote, that's the plural. In English, you don't feel it so much, unless you say the word they and he in the sentence. In Hebrew, it's right there in the word ha'am bachar, the nation chose, voted, or ha'am bacharu, the people chose a certain president. So we see over here that if you're talking about the people, we're going to say it in plural. If we're talking about the nation, then we're going to say it in singular. And we are going to see this is very, very clear in the pasuk. What is the difference if I say the people or the nation? Why do I change it from singular to plural? Very simple. When I'm talking about an action, the action is the same by all the people. The nation voted. Everybody went to vote. Singular. If I'm talking about the people, every person thought of something else. This one voted for what's here in America called the Democrat. This one voted for the Republican. This one voted for the Liberal. This one voted for something else. And not only that, even all the people who vote for the Republican candidate or the Democratic candidate, they all have a different feeling and a different agenda of why they voted. This one because of this concept, this one because of that concept, even if they're voting for the same person, but everyone has a different agenda. So when we're talking about the feelings of people, we cannot say it in singular. It's always going to be plural. When we're talking about a fact, something that was done by everybody, that we could say it in the singular, because there's no difference between one and the other. How do we see it? Look in the Pesukim. Go back to our source number 6 and 7. These were our sources to see where the Torah goes back and forth from singular to plural. And you will see that there's a pattern here. The pattern is, if we're talking about an action, we could say it's singular, because everybody does the same action. When we're talking about feelings, over there it changes. Everybody's different. We cannot use singular. We could only use plural. Based on this, we will understand the whole story with the Egyptians, with the Yidden, with Matan Torah, etc. Go to source number 6. What did we say? Source number 6 from Parshas Yisro, after the story of Matan Torah. Perik Chav Pasuk Tezvav. V'chol ha'am royim es hakolos. All the people, they see the voices. V'salapidim and the torches. V'eskala shofar v'saharoshen, the voice of the shofar and the mountain that was fuming. Vayar ha'am. The people saw, singular, vayar, they saw. Vayonu, and they trembled. Vayamdu merochek, and they stood from far. We see that when the Torah says what they saw, the Torah says vayar ha'am. The people saw in singular. When they trembled, it says they trembled in the plural, or when they stood far. Why? Very simple. Vayar, to see. Everybody sees the exact same thing. So therefore we could say it in singular. Vayonu, trembling. There's different types of trembling. A child trembles like this. A person who understands much more what is going on trembles more. A person who understands less trembles less. Therefore, the Torah goes back from singular to plural. When it comes to seeing, it's singular, because everybody sees the same thing. When it comes to trembling, there's a difference. So it's very, very clear here. Go to the next source. So number 7, in Parshas Beshalach, Perik Yudalet Pasuk Lamed Aleph, when they came to the Yam Suf and they saw what the Rebbe did. In the beginning of the pasuk it says, "Vayar Yisrael es Yodela," and Yisrael saw the great hand of the Eibishter. And then it says, "Vayiru ha'am es Hashem." Vayiru, yirot, fear. They feared. Vayaminu b'Hashem, and they believed in the Eibishter. This is plural. Seeing, to see the sea, to be able to see the sea that splits, that you have. Everybody the same. Children saw it. Grown-ups saw it. Moshe Rabbeinu. The simple people. Everybody saw the same thing. Water splits. So that is singular. Everybody sees the same thing. But fear of the Eibishter and belief in the Eibishter, faith in the Eibishter, oh, that's a very different story. That's very a feeling. So that's why the Torah has it in the plural. Clear? Beautiful, huh? What? Gewaldig. Excellent question. I love that when you ask such a look. Very good, very, very good. So what did we say? That when people see, we say it in singular. When people fear or tremble, we say it in plural, right? Look at source number 6. It doesn't look that way. When the pasuk talks about what the Yidden saw by Matan Torah, what does it say? V'chol ha'am, and all the people royim es hakolos, they see the voices and the torches, and then it says vayar ha'am vayanu, and the people saw and they trembled. In that same pasuk, we have the concept of seeing in plural and in singular. In the beginning, it says royim es hakolos, and later it says vayar, and they saw. It says in singular. How could we use the same thing of plural and singular by seeing? Excellent question. And the answer is, I'm going to ask you a question. V'chol ha'am, and all the people, royim es hakolos, they see the voices. Did you ever see a voice? Can you see a voice? What does it mean they saw the voices? Yeah, Vesalapidim, the torches he could see. How could you see the voices? What does it mean to see the voices? And therefore there's a whole Sichel, Chelik Vav in the 6th volume, where the Rebbe explains that it says that by Matan Torah was Royim es nishma v'shomin es nira. They were able to see what is heard, and they were able to hear what is seen. And the Rebbe explains the difference of seeing and hearing. What is stronger when someone sees something or someone understands something? What penetrates deeper into the brain? Something that someone sees or something that someone really understands. So here Royim doesn't mean just seeing. Here Royim, they understood. So therefore, you cannot bring any proof from this Royim. Whenever we talk about an action, we talk in singular. Whenever we're talking about a feeling, that is already or a comprehension, that is already something which is in plural. So therefore, there is no contradiction here. On the contrary, but the question was excellent and to the point, and I really appreciate that. So, eventually, Mitzvah Shem, yeah, we will learn that Sich and Chelik Vav, don't worry. But right now we're going back to our subject. So now, when we're saying that when it comes to a concept of an action, we say that they're all one. When we're talking about feelings, then it's plural. So now let's go back to the story of the Egyptians and let's see what happened over here. The Egyptians are running after the Yidden. How did that happen? Why did they start running after the Yidden? They sent them out from Egypt. Why are they running after them? Go to source number 11. Source number 11, like last week's parsha, in the week before Yisro, B'shalach Perek Yudalet Pasuk Hey. The Torah says as follows: Vayugad lemelech Mitzrayim kivorach ha'am. And someone gave the message to the king of Egypt that the nation ran away. Oh, they didn't run away. Vayehafech levav Paroi va'avodav el ha'am. And Paroi had a change of heart toward and his servants towards the Yidden. And they said, what did we do that we sent away the Yidden? And they decided they're going to run after the Jews. This was a change of heart. In other words, this is a feeling over here. The feeling of the Egyptians changed towards the Yidden. Like this feeling of hatred. Are you going to tell me that they all had the exact same feeling of hatred? No, it's impossible. Paroi had one feeling of hatred. He really hated them because they really messed him up. The simple guy who lives in his field over there and he had almost nothing to do with the Jews, he had it a little bit because Paroi feels bad, so therefore he also feels bad or whatever it is. But you can't say that they all had the same exact feeling towards running after the Yidden. And therefore, the Pasuk should have said, Vayehafchu libam, their hearts changed. No, the Torah says, Vayehafich levav. Therefore comes Rashi and says that when the Yidden saw the Egyptians running after the Yidden, what does it say? Vehine Mitzrayim noiseya achareihem. Here's something unprecedented happen. That the agenda, the feeling here was belev echad. They were all equal. They were all in the same, just like Paroi. Paroi, who was the epitome of hatred towards the Jewish people. When they were running after the Yidden, there was one agenda. We are running after the Yid. And therefore, says Rashi, the Torah goes out of its way and it says noiseya achareim. Why does it say it in one singular? Because here's something unprecedented happened. That belev echad. That they were all with one agenda. Their feeling was exactly the same. Otherwise, the Torah would have said noiseim, that they are running. But because it's a feeling, vayehafech levav Paroi, it was their heart. And therefore, says Rashi, belev echad. And that made it that keish echad, that they become like one. Because any group of people who wants to accomplish a certain goal, right? Like we said before about the voting, for example. So it's only a temporary thing that they're all voting the same thing. Their agendas change. Each one is doing it because of his own agenda. This is how it always works in all political things, and not only political, in other things also. People don't have the same exact feelings. Here, when the Egyptians went, says the Torah, Chidush Nifla, Belev Echad. This is what made it Keish Echad, that they became as one. So there's concept of other nations being one is something very temporary and something very rare. It happened then by the Egyptians that they all had the same agenda, but you will hardly find that anywhere else. There's not a single party in the world that you will find that although they all vote for the same thing, that they all do it for the same agenda. No. And because people change their minds, etc. So it's only that temporary moment that you see an action that it's the same. But when it comes to Yidden, that's really a total different story. So in other words, let's summarize it. Over here it says singular by the Egyptians. Why? Because Belev Echad, their agenda was one, unprecedented. The agenda, the feeling should be one, and that made them Keish Echad. That's why Rashi says it in this order. What happens by the Yidden? That's a total different story, and we're going to find something unbelievable, phenomenal, and it's a little bit deep, but in Yitzchok Hashem we will be able to do that. By the Yidden, there are no agendas. That's not how it works. We would think the Yidden are coming now to Matan Torah, to receive the Torah. And they're all preparing, each one. They were counting the days of the Omer. They can't wait to receive the Torah. So obviously the preparation that each person did to Matan Torah, to the receiving of the Torah, was different from one to the other. You can't compare how Moshe Rabbeinu prepares himself for the Torah, his feelings, his emotions, and how a simple Jew prepares himself for Matan Torah. How the 70 elders prepared themselves for Matan Torah. How the children of Aaron prepared themselves. Everyone, there were all kinds of levels. There were the judges of thousands and the judges of hundreds. Each one has his feelings and his emotions on how we prepare for Matan Torah. So we may think that there were differences. Comes the Torah and says, nope, that's not what happened. Comes the Torah and says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael Keish Echad. They are all one. The fact that they are all one, do you know what that did? Belev Echad. They're also, all the preparations were one. There is no difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and the simple Jew. Because there is no difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and the simple Jew, therefore their preparations to Matan Torah was also with no difference. Now this is totally new. This is a phenomenal. Let's break this up for a moment. What does it mean that the Yidden were one? What united them? Why are they considered united? What is it that unites them? So someone is saying that because they came now to receive the Torah, so the Torah is something so great that the Torah united them all. No. That's not what happened. What happened over here? Go to source number 12. Let me just give a little introduction here. This world, you ever heard the expression Reshus Harabim, Reshus HaYachid? In the laws of Shabbos. In the laws of Shabbos, there's something which is called a public domain, the street, public, and Reshus HaYachid, and a private domain. In a private domain, you're allowed to carry, you're allowed to do all kinds of things. In a public domain, you're not allowed to do almost anything. You're allowed to walk, of course, but you're not allowed to carry, you're not allowed to, etc. The world seems to be a Reshus Harabim, a public domain. That's what it seems to be. Really, what is it? A Reshus HaYachid. It's a private domain of the Eibishter. The Eibishter made it in such a way that the world looks like a Reshus Harabim, looks like a public domain, as we're going to see in a minute from the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. The job of Yidden is to turn this world, which looks like a public domain, into a Reshus HaYachid. Reshus, a domain HaYachid of the one and only, of the Eibishter. This is the job of the Yidden. And now we're going to see something phenomenal. Go to source number 12. What does Alter Rebbe say in Tanya? In the end of Perek Lamed Gimel, The first few words that we're going to say, every child knows, because it's one of the 12 psukim. Says the Alter Rebbe as follows in Perek Lamed Gimel, chapter 33 in Tanya, towards the end, mamish the last words. Yismach Yisrael be'osav. There's a pasuk that we say every day in davening. Yismach Yisrael be'osav. That a Jew should rejoice in his makers. But what is this makers in his doing? Pirush, says the Alter Rebbe as follows. That's what it means. Shekol mi shehu mizera Yisrael. That anyone who is from the Jewish nation. Yesh lo lismoyach. He has to rejoice. Besimchas Hashem. In the rejoicing in the joy of the Eibishter. What is the joy of the Eibishter? Asher sos v'someach. The Eibishter is happy. His joy. Bedirose betachtonim. In his house that he finally has. Where is his house? Here on planet Earth. Dira betachtonim. The house of the Eibishter. When a person walks into his new house, he is overjoyed. His house is beautiful, exactly how he wanted it. The same thing, the Eibishter is happy that he has a house, so the Yidden are happy with the joy of the Eibishter. Explains Alter Rebbe. Why is it called Be'oisav? His makers is doing Sheheim Bechinas Asiya Mamish. How do you make a house for the Eibishter? Through action. Action, which is the lowest level, that's how you do it. And Alter Rebbe explains. Vezehu shekasuv Be'oisav Lashon Rabim. The Eibishter is happy with his makers. How could you talk about the Eibishter that he's a makers? He's a maker. The Eibishter is one. How could you say in his makers? Explains the Alter Rebbe, Lashon Rabim, Shehu oilam hazeh hagashmi hamolei klipes v'sitra achra. This refers to the world which seemingly is a place from not holiness. Shenikra reshus harabim ve'turi de pruda. And it is called Reshus Harabim, it is called a public domain because there are so many different things here. And what's called in the expression of Kabbalah, Ture de Pruda. Ture de Pruda means the mountains of separation. The whole world looks like there's millions and billions of things which are totally unconnected to each other. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Yidden take that and they transform them into light, which they seem to be darkness. They all become a Reshus HaYachid, a private domain for the unity of the Eibishter be'emunazu through this faith. Which means the world seems to be a world of multiplicity, fragments of all kinds of things. Says the Alter Rebbe, it looks like a Reshus Harabim, but it is not. The idea is to take this whole Reshus Harabim and show how really this is a house for the Eibishter. It is a Reshus HaYachid. It is a dwelling place of unity of the one and only, the Eibishter. This is the job of Yidden. Who does it? Yidden. How do we see that? How do we see that the Yidden are the ones that have that job? Look at source number 13. In another minute, this whole story is going to look unbelievably beautiful. Source number 13 is the first pasuk in the Torah in Parshas Bereshis. Perek Aleph, pasuk Aleph, says Rashi. The Torah says, Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'zaretz. In the beginning, the Eibishter created heaven and earth. The whole creation, Bereshis bara. Says Rashi, what does it mean, Bereshis? Beis Reshis. There are two things that are the beginning for which the Eibishter created the world. Who are these two? Says Rashi, look at source number 13. Bishvil ha-Torah shenikras Reshis. Torah is called Reshis, the beginning, as there's a pasuk in Mishlei, in Perek Ches, that says Reshis Darkei. We're not going to go into the details here, but the Torah is called Reshis. Ubishvil tzadikim, and for the tzadikim, which are the Yidden, shenikru Reshis, they're also called Reshis. Where is that? In Yirmiyah, in Perek Beis, etc. So we see, why did the Eibishter create a world? Two things. Torah and Yidden. Two separate things unrelated to each other. The Torah are the blueprints of the world. The Yidden are the ones who are going to transform the world. Yisrael is an entity for itself. This is what the Yidden are. Before Matan Torah, before the Torah was given, Yidden had the status Yisrael, unrelated to Torah. Yes, later what the Yidden do, they take the Torah and they do the mitzvahs, etc. But there's a concept which is called Yisrael, Yidden unrelated to Torah. What is the idea of Yidden unrelated to Torah? Go to source number 14, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, Perek Levi, Perek, the 32nd chapter, which is one of the foundations of Torah Chassidus. Says the Alter Rebbe very clear that Yidden are unity, they're one. Yidden. Why? Look, source number 14. Kol Yisrael Achim Mamish. Yidden are called brothers. They're one. Mitzat Sheirish Nafsham Ba'Hashem Echad. Because their source is Hashem Echad. One Eibishter. Rak shagufim mechulakim. The bodies are separated. But the essence of Yidden, they are Hashem Echad. They are rooted in the Eibishter, which is one. It's a total unity. And this is what Rashi is telling us. Vayichan Sham Yisrael. What happens over here is the Yidden became a nation, Yisrael. Keish Echad. They are one. Why? Because they are connected to the Eibishter. Automatically, because they are one, that also affected B'Lev Echad, that their agenda, the preparation to Matan Torah was exactly the same. But this wasn't because they are receiving the Torah. That's why Rashi doesn't bring the end words, Vayichan Sham Yisrael, Neged Hahar, that this happened because it was in front of the mountain. No, the Mechilta does that. Rashi doesn't say that. Rashi just says, Vayichan Sham Yisrael. Over here something happened, that the Yidden now became the nation, Keish Echad. They are one. There is no difference between one Yid and another, which is an unbelievable novelty, that a whole nation should be considered as one piece, as one, with no differences. And not only that, that made a second novelty, which also is unprecedented in history, that all their feelings were exactly the same, even though they were all different people. So now we see an unbelievable point here. But the real unbelievable is coming soon. This is nothing yet. By the Mitzrayim, what do we say? It's impossible that there should be unity there. Impossible. The one time, unprecedented in history, that their feelings were all one, and that made them that they should be considered one. That was when they were running after the Yidden. But otherwise, you cannot find the concept of unity in Mitzrayim. It's impossible. It just doesn't work. By the Yidden, it's the other way around. Not only you can find it, Yidden are one entity, united, one. The Alter Rebbe makes it very clear. Achim Mamish, it's like brothers, like one family. And why? Because their source is Hashem Echad, from the Eibishter, which is one. What happened by Matan Torah is that this did that also all their feelings were all the same. It was visible, the concept that they were one. But not because they were receiving the Torah, but because they are in essence one, because their job is to take the world, which looks like a Reshus Harabim, which looks like a multitude of things, and they turn that into a Reshus HaYachid, because they resemble that concept of Yachid, of one. And that's what we say in davening, in Mincha and Shabbos and many other times. Ato Echad, B'Shimcha Echad, the Rebbeinu is one, His name is one. Umi ke'amcha Yisrael, Goy Echad ba'aretz. And who is like the Yidden, who is one nation? As Chassidus explains, Goy Echad ba'aretz, that they are the ones who bring the Echad into the world. That uniqueness, that unity. So, seems like that Rashi is saying something unbelievable. That over here, the unity of the Yidden is something which is essential. It's the essence of Yidden. And this caused by Matan Torah that all their feelings were exactly the same. Seemingly, this concept of unity that Yidden have, seemingly, others don't have it. It's only something found by Yidden because they are rooted into Hashem Echad. Now, are you sitting? Listen to this one. We're going to talk now about a new concept, about a big one. We're going to see now that this concept of bringing oneness, unity of the Eibishter in this world is not only through Yidden. Lahavdil Goyim have that too. Look how this works. Go to source number 13. Source number 13 is a pasuk in Kehelis, Peirik Zayin, pasuk Yud Daled. And it says over there, Ezeh le'um mazeh asa elikim. The Eibishter created things with their opposites. Zeh le'um mazeh, this one opposite the other. What are we talking about over here? What kind of things are opposites? Says the Alter Rebbe in Tanya, go to source number 16. The Alter Rebbe, this is in the beginning of Tanya, in chapter 6, this is foundation, this is very important concepts in Chassidus. The Alter Rebbe says as follows. Go to number 16. Kemoishe nefesh alikis klula me'eser sfiras kedoshas. Just like the nefesh alikis, the person has a godly soul, which is connected to the Eibishter, and the person has a nefesh habahamis, has a animal soul. With a person, either he's an animal or he's connected to the Eibishter. It's one of the two, depending which one of the two souls is the one which is having the most effect on the person. I'm sure most of you have learned Tanya. You know that's what the Alter Rebbe discusses. Says the Alter Rebbe, just like the nefesh alikis, the godly soul, is comprised of these 10 spheres, the 10 faculties. So too says the Alter Rebbe, kacha nefesh de sitra achra, also the other nefesh, the nefesh from the other side, the other soul. Klula me'eser kisrin de misavusa. It has the 10, what's called the crowns of impurity, which is the opposite of the holy ones. So we see here clearly that godliness is not only in godliness, also the other side has something. How do we see this? Because the Rebbe has things on both ends. Just if it's in one side, it's got to be in the other. Before Matan Torah, before the Rebbe gave the Torah, there was no such thing as unity on the other side. Why? Because God and the world were separate. What happened by Matan Torah? By Matan Torah, something unbelievable happened. Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai. God came down on Mount Sinai. The Medrash gives a muscle to this, that there's a country where the king said that the people from the north cannot go to the south, the people from the south cannot go to the north. It has to be a separation. Total separation. One day the king comes and says, we're going to break this decree. We're going to be able to go from north to south, from south to north, and the king is the first one who's going to do it. He broke the barrier and he went and he showed the people you could go on either one. Says the Medrash, so too. Until the Eibishter, this is a long concept, but I'm just going to say the point. Until the Eibishter came down in Har Sinai, the year 2448, the world and godliness were two separate things. That's why it was impossible to take something material and turn it into spirituality and do a mitzvah with it. The Avos, Moshe Rabbeinu, they couldn't take things and turn them into mitzvahs. That's what the Rebbe only gave the mitzvah of Milah, very few mitzvahs before Matan Torah, because the world wasn't yet a vessel to be able to accept Elikus, godliness. Once the Rebbe gave the Torah, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai, the Rebbe came down, so now godliness and the world are already sort of blended a little bit with each other. Now we could take wool and turn it into tzitzis. We could take parchment, turn it into a Sefer Torah, etc. We could do all kinds of things with gashmius, with material, and turn it into spiritual. Therefore, before Matan Torah, before the Rebbe gave the Torah, the world out there, other than Yisrael, had absolutely no connection to the unity of God. They weren't possible. Because the concept of unity of God is something which is above rational. It doesn't make sense. The world, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, is a Reshus Harabim, looks like a world of multitude, of public domain. A Yid, because he's connected to the Eibishter and he learns the Torah, so he comes to that realization that there's something which is above the rationale. And above the rationale, everything is united. Therefore, before the Rebbe gave the Torah and there was this blend of godliness with the world out there was not possible. It was impossible then to comprehend anything which is above rational. Therefore, when they had an agenda together, that's what made them united. But if there wasn't that, you couldn't do it. After the Rebbe gave the Torah, at this point, even the Gentiles, even those who did not receive the Torah, have some kind of sense to something which is above rational. Where do we see that? And now we're going to see something unbelievable. Go to source number 17. And this is, we're going to see where everyone is part of this unity. The Jewish people, Lavdil, non-Jewish people, makes no difference. Look at source number 17. There's a Rambam in Hilchos Melachim Peirik Ches Halacha Yud. This is almost towards the end of the Rambam. And later, maybe if we have some time, we'll discuss why is it towards the end of the Rambam. The Rambam says as follows. Source number 17. Moshe Rabbeinu Loihin chilatayra v'mitzvahs ela l'Yisrael. Moshe Rabbeinu, he gave the Torah as an inheritance only to the Jewish people. Shenemar, Meirasha Kehilas Yaakov. Because it says the Torah is an inheritance to the Jewish people. Ulechol haroitze lehis gayer misharomis. And anyone who wants to convert from the other nations. Shenemar, Kochem Kageir. Because it says, the Torah, just like you, so too the convert. Aval Mishal Erotza. Someone who doesn't want to convert, Ein Kaifin Eisele Kabel Torah Mitzvahs. He doesn't have to accept Torah Mitzvahs. In other words, the Rebbe gave the Torah to the Yid, Moshe Rabbeinu gave the Torah to the Yid, and anyone from the other nations who wants to have that, he could have it, but he doesn't have to. That's statement number one. Next statement says the Rambam. V'chein tziva Moshe Rabbeinu mipi agvura. So too Moshe Rabbeinu commanded from the Eibishter. Lakuf is called boy ha'olam, to compel, to convince all the people of the world lekabel mitzvahs shinstavu b'nech, to accept the laws that Noah, the children of Noah, were commanded, which are known as 7 Noahide laws. V'tzarich lekabel b'fnei shloshech avedim, and he has to accept it in front of 3 people, etc. Next halacha, says the Rambam, halacha Yud Aleph. Kol ha'mekabel sheva mitzvahs, anybody who accepts upon himself the 7 mitzvahs, v'nizer la'aseisan, and he's careful by doing them, hareze mechasidus u'meha'olam. He is from the righteous of the nations. Righteous Gentiles, which is called. And he has a portion in the world to come. However, there's a precondition here. Listen to these words. This is only if he accepts these mitzvahs. Because the Eibishter commanded it in the Torah. And the Eibishter let us know, he notified us through Moshe Rabbeinu, that before the Eibishter gave the Torah, the Eibishter already had told us to the Bnei Noach. So in other words, if a Gentile wants to accept the Sheva Mitzvahs, he could only do that if he accepts that the Eibishter said that in the Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu. But what happens if somebody does it because this was a logical conclusion, his brain, his intellect dictated that to him, that it makes sense? This is not a righteous Gentile and he's not one of the sages, of the smart people. No. There's only one way Hashava Mitzvahs B'nai Noach works. If a Gentile accepted them, why? Because the Eibishter said it in the Torah, something which is above the rationale, then he could be considered Chasidu Masayla. What do we see here? That the Torah makes it very clear that even people who are not Yidden, even Gentiles, have a sense, a concept, a attachment to something which is above the rationale, which is the Eibishter in Torah. And when they do that, they are part of this unification. So therefore, although they have it in a much more limited fashion, the Yidden have it because in essence, they are one and connected into the Eibishter. There's someone who is not part of that, he still has the concept, because when he does the Sheva Mitzvahs, why? Because the Eibishter said it. So he also has, in a certain extent, part in that unity, because he recognizes that there is an Eibishter, something which is above the natural. And this is what the story that we said before with the yacht, that the simple person who never heard of God, never heard of the Eibishter, never heard of Torah, mitzvahs of course not, all of a sudden he sees that there's a person who, Baruch Hashem, has everything, and he davens to the Eibishter, which is something which is above the rationale. How much more so that he should do it? And he comes to the realization that if all the people in the world would do that, this world will be a proper place for the Eibishter, which is exactly what the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya. So we see here clearly that everybody in the world, they are Yidden, they have a bigger job, but everyone in the world must come to the sense and realization that there's an Eibishter. And this way he is part of this big project of getting the world to become one, a unity under one God. Therefore, finishes off the Rebbe. Look at source number 18. This is the Likutei Sichos, the last 3 paragraphs of the Sikha here that we mentioned before from volume 21. This is on page 107. Says the Rebbe as follows. Und der Inyan, and this concept, as noch Matan Teure haben euch nicht Yidden a Sheiches zu Bchinas Elikus. That after Matan Teure, because we broke this barrier, God came down, even non-Jewish people have a connection, a sheiches, a connection to the concept of godliness, was is hecher fun seichel u'meischalkus, which is above the concept of rationale, intellect, and fragmentation and diversity. This is spelled out clearly in the halacha. As der Kiyum for Sheva Mitzvahs B'neach dar sein, that the reason why the non-Jewish people are following the Sheva Mitzvahs, nit mipnei hechra adas, not because it's an intellectual, a logical conclusion. And also not, they're not doing it because the Rebbe told this to Adam Rishon, to Adam, or to Noach. Nor mipnei, because, as it says in the Rambam, Shetziva Kodesh Baruch Hu Bohem B'Torah, because the Rebbe commanded in the Torah, V'Hidiyena of the Moshe Rabbeinu, and he told us through Moshe Rabbeinu, Shebnei Noach Mikoydem Nitztavu Bohem, that this is something the Rebbe had given already to Adam and to Noach. But why is he doing it? Because the one who told him this is Moshe Rabbeinu through the Torah. Continues the Rebbe, and because the Gemara says that every single person must say to himself, that the whole world was created for me, not that I'm such a great guy, but that it is my job to take care of this world. That because of him was created the whole world. From, there are 4 levels. There's the mineral, the dormant, there's the vegetable, there's the animal, and the human. 4 levels. Says the Rebbe that the whole world, from the lowest level, which is the dormant world, which is the mineral world, until the highest level, which is medaber, which is human. And every single person must take this world and make it into a reshus hayochid, to make it into a private domain. Continues the Rebbe, therefore every single Jew has to put all his efforts, as much as he could, not only to spread Torah and Judaism amongst Yidden, but he also has to affect, influence the Bnei Noach, that they should be Mekayim their 7 mitzvahs, and how should they fulfill the 7 mitzvahs? Because the Rebbe commanded this to them, where? In the Torah. So here we see an unbelievable chiddush. The Rebbe makes it very, very clear. Before Matan Torah, before the Rebbe gave the Torah, true, there was a difference. Somebody who was not a Yisrael was not able to have the concept of Achdus, the concept of unity. It was impossible unless they had an agenda, which was only one time. After the Rebbe gave the Torah, and in that Torah he says that the Goyim have to do the Sheva Mitzvahs B'Neach. Why? Because the Rebbe said so in the Torah through Moshe Rabbeinu. That means that they also have a connection to the above rational, above the intellect, to where? To the area which is called Reshus Hayachid, which means that everything is unified. So now we understand why it is incumbent upon every single Yid that any person that he meets, he has to talk to him about the concept that we have to take this world and turn it to a world of goodness and kindness, and that is through that people follow on Eberstein, that they believe and understand that there is a God who is one, and this whole world is one, and Mirz Hashem, very soon, Mashiach is going to come, And we are going to be able to see how this is one world under one God. And briefly, somebody asked, how come the Rambam has this towards the end? Because the Rambam is a sefer that wrote about all the mitzvahs. Once the Rambam finished writing all the 630 mitzvahs, then he also writes what are the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And right after that, he talks about the halachas of Mashiach. The halachas of Mashiach. This is all in Hilchos Malachim. This is chapter 8, where he talks about the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And chapter 11 and chapter 12 are regarding the concept of Mashiach. Why? Because this goes with the system. We're not going to get into it because there's a lot of sichos on this subject of Sheva mitzvahs, but in a one-liner, before Mashiach comes, that is when we're going to have a situation in the world where we can actually influence the world to do the Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach. And until our generation, it was always impossible because the nations were oppressing the Yidden, so the Yidden didn't even have the opportunity. In our generation, Baruch Hashem, we are in free countries, countries where they let the Yidden do everything they want regarding Torah and mitzvahs. Therefore, this is the opportunity that the Yidden are seizing to do what it says in the Rambam, that the Rambam makes it very clear that Tziva Moshe Mipi Agvura, Moshe Rabbeinu said that we have to get all the non-Jewish people to do the Sheva mitzvahs, and this way we are going to have a world which is going to be a Reshus HaYachid, a oneness, unity, and this is going to be with the coming of Mashiach, Teikef Umiyad Mamish. I know that you have a lot of questions on the subject because I only touched the surface, but at least here we see clearly how the Torah makes it very, very clear that Goyim have a connection to Hashem Echad, and this is what we're supposed to do. So therefore, let's all make sure that whoever we meet, always make sure to say a good word, get them to say a good word, and the main thing is to talk to them that there's an Eibishter, a superpower, who he's the one that runs the world, and through this we're going to have a Dira Le'Yizbarach Betachtonim, and we're going to be Zeicha to Hashem Echad, U'Shmo Echad, Teikef Umiyad Mamash. Any questions? Let's not get personal. I'd rather not discuss that too much. He wanted to know, he heard that I once wrote, by the instruction of the Rebbe, something on Sheva mitzvahs. It wasn't by the instructions of the Rebbe, it was the Rebbe's secretary, Rabbi Mendel, who had asked that two young men should work on a certain project. Yes, I worked on it, but we'll have to leave it for a different time because it's another whole story for itself. Yes, I, Baruch Hashem, had the great zchus of being involved in this subject, but we'll have to leave that for a different time. And in Mirz Hashem, before we get to that time, we will be zeicha to see the Beis Hamikdash Hashlishi, Teikef Umiyad Mamash.